I first visited the Henry Knox Museum in 2005 with my first cousin, Kathy Wilkinson. I live in California, and the museum is in Thomaston, Maine. The town of just 2,700 residents looks over a sheltered bay on the St. George River. This bay was considered a prime spot for living since before the English arrived. The local Weymouth tribe named it Secashet, which meant a peaceful place. In 1605, 185 years before Henry began building on a mound facing toward the Atlantic, English explorer Captain George Weymouth stood very near there and claimed it with a wooden cross. He would tell King James it was the perfect place to build a colony. This image of the bay was painted during Henry's time. Henry's wife Lucy inherited the land from her grandfather Samuel Waldo. Samuel died suddenly in 1759 before he was able to take possession of his lands. The patent went to his daughter Hannah Waldo, who was married to Thomas Flucker. Thomas Flucker was the Secretary of Massachusetts when the Revolution began. He and Hannah were not happy when their daughter Lucy fell in love with a rebel named Henry Knox. Alas, they consented to the marriage, which occurred the 14th of June, 1774. Mark Poles, who wrote a biography on Henry Knox, wrote that friends were struck by the tender nature of Henry and Lucy's relationship, as well as the way their personalities seemed to complement each other. General Nathanael Greene would comment to his wife that he found Henry and Lucy to be a perfect married couple. Samuel Waldo's original patent for the land included today's Waldo and Knox counties. In 1776, after Henry's guns chased the British out of Boston, the Fluckers fled with the rest of the British. They forfeited their patent, but after the war, Henry and Lucy were able to get the lands back. Lucy and Henry took possession of their property after the Revolutionary War. They named the home Montpelier, the same name James Madison used to name his house in Virginia, and the same name the people of Vermont call their capital. The original Montpelier is on the Riviera in France. Henry Knox spoke French and was one of the best friends of the Marquis de Lafayette during the Revolutionary War. Henry and Lucy moved in with 7 children. Lucy Jr. was 19, Henry Jackson was 15, Julia was 12, George was 5, Carolyn was 4, Henrietta was 2, and baby Marcus Bingham was 9 months old. They had already lost 5 children, 4 to disease and 1 because of an accident. Henry and Lucy were big spenders. They had a lavish lifestyle and entertained more than they could afford. Unlike George Washington's Mount Vernon, their lands didn't generate an income yet. It was still on raw pioneer land. In October of 1806, while eating dinner, Henry got a chicken bone caught in his throat. It got infected and he died. He was 56 and Lucy was 50. They'd had 13 children, but when Henry died, only 3 were still living. His daughter Lucy was 30 years old and married to a Harvard lawyer named Ebenezer Thatcher. His son, Henry Jackson Knox, was 26 and also married but estranged from his wife. Another daughter, Carolyn, was 15. Their mom, Lucy, stayed in the house until her death in 1824. The family was getting deeper and deeper in debt. Henry Jackson Knox wasn't very good at making money and died in 1832. His sister Carolyn, now 41, moved in and became the heiress. She married 2 times, but left no children when she died in 1851. That left their sister Lucy, who was a 75-year-old widow. Lucy Knox was the only child of Henry Knox who left descendants. She and Ebenezer Thatcher had 8 children. 5 left children of their own. Only 3 were still alive when Lucy died in 1854. By that time, the family was in such debt that her son, Henry Knox Thatcher, had to sell the estate, the house, and everything in it in order to pay off the debt. By 1871, the house was in such disrepair it was demolished. This map of Thomaston was drawn 7 years later in 1878. The red circle shows where the mansion used to be. The only thing that wasn't destroyed was a red brick building that had been servants' quarters. That was turned into the railroad station for Thomaston. You can see the image of a train checking across a bridge to the right of the circle. The blue circle shows you where today's Montpelier stands. In the early 1920s, when our nation was getting ready for the 150th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, the General Henry Knox chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution gathered the funds to rebuild Montpelier. It would be an exact replica. I belong to the DAR, and you can see from their website that there are only 4 of us who have proved our descendancy from Henry Knox. Catherine Fowler, the daughter of Julia Knox Thatcher, died in 1905, so she wasn't around for the sesquicentennial. Harriet Rice died in 1923, so she may have been involved at the early stages of gathering the funds. She was the daughter of Luciana Thatcher. Dorcia Bentley Hayes was a singer and dancer and pretty famous. She was the granddaughter of Harriet Leeson, and she didn't die until 1990, so maybe she had something to do with it. The last one on the list is me, and I wasn't born yet. I'm the daughter of Tom Ames, the son of Edith Winter, who was the daughter of Alice Ames, who was the daughter of Charles Ames, who was the son of Luciana Thatcher. Charles Ames was the half-brother of Harriet Leeson we just mentioned. Luciana Thatcher gave birth to Charles out of wedlock. We've never learned who his father was. Then she married Mr. Leeson, and she had Harriet. Even in the 1920s, when the DAR was building a new Montpelier, illegitimate births were kept secret. One of the first things I did when I reached Thomaston was take a tour of the mansion. We saw the Oval Entry Hall, which was built way before the Oval Office in the White House. The Knox Mansion was probably one of the largest estates in New England for its time. This room was meant to impress. There were 2 white marble fireplaces. The doors had been molded with steam, so they fit the oval shape. There's a painting of Henry over one of the mantels, as well as a painting of George Washington's first cabinet. Henry Knox served as Secretary of War. Thomas Jefferson was Secretary of State. Alexander Hamilton was Secretary of the Treasury, and Edmund Randolph served as Attorney General. Much like today, there were political differences. Alexander Hamilton and Henry Knox were Federalists. They wanted a stronger central government. Thomas Jefferson was a Republican. He wanted more power for the states. Bailey, our knowledgeable tour guide, showed us the bed where Henry slept and one of his favorite bookcases. In the original house, Henry had a collection of 15,353 volumes. 364 books were published in French. Some of the other items that had been given back to the home was the cradle that my ancestors slept in, a desk where Henry worked, and a pianoforte where Lucy and her sister played. It was the first of its kind in Maine. I mentioned that the Marquis de Lafayette was a good friend of Henry's. Lafayette gave this traveling kit to him. It includes everything from a tea set to shaving gear. The certificate on the wall is from Henry's establishment at the Society of the Cincinnati. Among other things, it helped wounded veterans and widows of soldiers. The society gave this chocolate pot to Henry and Lucy. It has their initials on the cups. One of the things that made Henry so successful in his job as the head of artillery were his engineering skills, and he used those skills to design this stairway. This is the tree of Knox descendants that the museum had on their wall. I made it my mission to update that family tree before I went to Maine. From Charles Kerr names alone, there are 250 living descendants. It was fun to see Hannah Waldo and her husband Thomas Flucker on the wall. They are my 7 times great-grandparents. I also took a tour of the town. I stayed in this cozy rental I found on vrbo.com. It's hard to see on this map, but some of the streets are named after my ancestors. Knox Street runs north to south from Main Street. Flucker and Thatcher Streets run east to west from that. The village center on Main Street is 2 blocks long. This is a little market, and this is a hotel that was built in 1828, the year my great-great-grandfather Charles was born. There are reasons to suspect that his unknown father was a carpenter. It's a small town, and this is a big building. Maybe that mysterious father helped with its construction. Heading toward the St. George River along Knox Road, I pass this historical marker that explains where the old mansion used to be. I followed Knox Street to where it reaches the bay. I'm looking up Knox Road toward town. Over here is where the Montpelier mansion, Knox and Lucy's house, used to be. And then, looking this way, you can see their view of the George River. During the late 1800s, Thomaston was known for its shipbuilding, and two of the wealthiest people in America lived here. On the mound where the house used to be is this rock. It's interesting they identify Henry as being First Secretary of War. To me, his service for 8 years as head of artillery for the Revolution was much more important. To the right of the stone is the brick house that used to be a servant's quarters. Then it became a railroad station. You can see from this picture that it was the oldest building in the United States used as a railroad station. For a while it was a house, and now it's the Thomaston Historical Society. Susan Devlin, the director, kindly gave me a tour, which is how I got some of these old photos. The Boom event started on Saturday at 10 o'clock. The museum set up tents for the book reading. They had a craft table for making colonial hats, and Revolutionary War reenactors prepared for their cannon display. Mary Kay Felton organized the event. She was on the museum's board of directors, and she's also the regent of the Lady Knox chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. 2 third cousins and fellow Knox descendants joined me for the day. Amy MacDonald also writes children's books, and she would be reading 2 of them. She came in from Weymouth, Maine. Charles Fletcher came in from Montville, Maine. My first cousin, Haven Younger, came for the weekend from Maryland. Besides being super supportive, she became my official page turner. The festivities began with cannon fire. Then I sang Henry's Big Kaboom. Here's the first verse.
Henry Knox, and he worked for Washington. He joined the Revolution when the British took his home. Henry's home had been in Boston, but the redcoats chased him out. So he and his fellow countrymen decided to fight back. All the rebels formed an army, north and south, that worked together. They were called the Continentals. They would fight in any weather. But an army's not an army when there's no artillery. I know where we can find some guns. I'll fix them, said Henry. George Washington, soldiers waited, ready to chase the British. To do. Blast a mighty cannon with the big kaboom! Good!
Then Amy MacDonald read her book, Little Beaver and the Echo. Sorry about the static from the wind.
I do need a friend, said the old turtle. But it wasn't me who was crying. We'll be your friends, said the duck and the otter and little beaver. Come with us. And so the turtle climbed into the boat. And the 4 of them paddled and paddled and paddled.
It was a very exciting day. Cousins laughed, and we sold lots of books. If you want to know more about Amy MacDonald, check out her website. And you can find Henry's Big Kaboom on Amazon, Ingram, and as a YouTube video. Thank you, Mary Kay Felton and the board of the museum, Matt Hansberry, their director, and Lindsay, Sarah, and Bailey, the docents.